Well, good morning to you. On this episode of My Junk is Stuff Garage, got something different. Different kind of train. It's not really HO. It's not Lionel. It's not American Flyer. It's not even American. I'm sure some of you have heard of Trix, or even Trix, is a nice German manufacturer of trains. Well, they date back a long time, back to the 1930s, and they made back then what was called double O gauge trains, so just slightly larger than the current day HO scale. What's interesting is they were three-rail trains, and they remained three-rail up until about 1967. They made, of course, trains in pre-war Germany, pre-World War II. And there was an interesting agreement, I shouldn't say agreement, but a little more history. I'll probably talk more about the history in the Fix-It part of the video, but there was a interaction between a British group and the Trix in Germany to actually manufacture some British outline trains. And part of the fun with that, which was that they shipped the German outline trains, so like the German locomotive castings and car bodies and so forth, to England, and they would actually remove those in some cases and install a locally made British outline locomotive casting or shell. So there's some interesting, really neat stuff there, a lot to learn. So I can't keep all the details in my head right now, but anyway, so what we've got here is this Trix history, if you will, for me started probably 25 years ago, maybe a little longer, and it started with this little 040, and I found this at an antique store, I think in Washington State. Here, I'll flip that over so you can read the plate on the bottom. Found this at an antique store in Washington State and said, oh yeah, I'll get it. And it was probably $5 or $10. It was not very much. So, and I love all kinds of trains, so I'm pretty crazy that way. And the wheels weren't locked up and yada yada yada. So it came all the way back home with me eventually. And it sat for a while because I didn't have anything to run it on. As you can see, it's three rail. So that's interesting. Later on, I got some Markland HO, some older stuff, which of course is also three rail. And I think if I remember right, I was able to at least get this thing to run. Now, I had to use the earlier 3600 series track for Markland, which actually has three rails, and not the later M track, which is stud rail. Of course, stud rail wouldn't work too good with these little sliders. So anyway, but I'm pretty sure I got this thing to run. And it's got a reverse unit and so forth. But anyway, so that's how that started with me. And then a few years ago on eBay, I picked up this circle of what I think is the later style track. I'm not sure what the designation for this particular type of track is. You can, if you guys know, you can bleep it down there in the comments, and we can update this. But where the story gets fun is just recently. There was a little buy it now auction on your favorite auction site there for well, I'll say a larger set, and it was pretty cheap. At least to me, it was pretty cheap. And well, gosh, I just couldn't resist because I didn't really have enough to set up any kind of a layout, and I like to be able to set up the whole layout with a particular style of train. So off I went, and what we got was this little British outline 440 steam locomotive and a tender, and a couple of passenger cars, one missing a roof, and all these freight cars came with it. One passenger car box, a signal, and all that Bakelite based three rail track that you see, and these controllers here. So originally, when these trains came out in the late 30s, they were dubbed Trix Twin. And so the really cool thing about this, again, they're 3-rail track. With the Bakelite track and with this later track, all 3 rails are electrically insulated from each other or isolated from each other. So there's technically 3 separate circuits there. And the twin, the Trix Twin part of it came about. You can see there's 2 rheostat controllers here. And they would have 1 transformer hooked to 2 rheostat controllers, with 1 rheostat going to each outer rail, with the center rail being the common. Then you'd have a locomotive. You could put the pickup, the 3rd rail pickup for the locomotives, on either side, and you could actually run 2 separate locomotives completely independently on the same loop. So that's where the terminology Trix Twin came in. At least that's the way I think I understand it. So that's actually a pretty unique thing. Now, Line L never did anything like that. They had their magic electrol, which allowed you to control one train differently than you controlled the second one, but it was not 2 separate circuits. So it's kind of a really interesting little deal. But anyway, and I also have this little bit of paper, not a whole lot here. Obviously it's in pretty bad shape. You can see a couple of the sets that would have been offered in the time frame and some of the rolling stock and so forth. Got a couple of switches and a crossover, a little paper for a lighting unit for the coaches. Now, interestingly, neither one of these coaches has the lighting unit in it, so maybe I can find that someday. And a little bit, also have this little instruction manual. So the bummer about this thing is, and this is where I'll end up doing the fix it video, will it run and all of that, is got the dreaded zinc pest on 2 wheels. This wheel right here, you can see it's completely missing its gears. So sad to see that. And this other wheel back here is crazed and cracking, hasn't come apart. It's probably swelled some. So we're a little bit tight. I don't know, we might see if we can get that running a little bit. But so I'm already talking to some other collectors, some early Trix collectors on in some Facebook groups and so forth. Might be able to get some replacement wheels. I suppose worst comes to worst, I do have a lathe. I might make a quick attempt at turning a blank up. It wouldn't have any spokes on it, but at least I could run the loco, and so until I can get a serviceable spare. So if you see right there, as I understand, that is a date code, so that is K2. And I'm learning, so feel free to type any comments down there to correct me. I believe the 2 is the month, so that would have been a February, and the K indicates the year. I'm not sure which year that is. Need to go talk about that with my new friends there and see if I can get that figured out. So looking in the back, this is the actual reverse mechanism, and so not sure how clear that comes in this pictures here, but there is a bit of corrosion and rust on this poor fella. So I'm gonna have my work cut out. So this will make a nice little, very nice little, interesting service and rebuilding video, because otherwise this locomotive's in nice shape. I mean, it's got a few nicks and rubs here and there, but it's complete. So the other incorrect thing about this is a tender. This isn't the tender that came physically with this locomotive when it was sold. What I've learned is that I don't know if you noticed, this locomotive doesn't have a pickup, sliders on the outside like the little 040 does. And so on these 440 locos, this second outer slider set would have been on the tender. And so I have an incorrect tender. And also I've been told that this, interestingly, The date code on this loco is A0, which should be January of 1950. And so that's when the chassis would have been made. But this loco, I believe, is the cab, the shell, is a pre-war shell. So they made the same mechanism, I think, back to 1935 or 36. So a little bit of a mix match there. A little bit, we've got some learning to do on that. But you know, that's what the fun is, right? Learning the history of these trains and all the ins and outs. It's never just, you know, one little thing that, oh, they started making this at one time and that's that. So there's just so much to get through. Got this nice die-cast semaphore signal. Actually works there. You got the little lever. You can raise it and lower it. Oh, here, let me show that correctly. Sorry, I'm gonna get a something to hold my phone. I'm still doing this by hand, so I'm just learning how to do this. I'm not an expert by any stretch. Let's see if that'll focus. Hopefully you can see the TTR Trix Twin decal on the bottom of that signal. This is the coach box for the short dining coach. Side picture of a couple of these cars. Little four-wheel wagons. The SO tank car is missing an end cap, so I'll have to see if I can come up with something there, and I'm going to have to bend up, get some tin or some thin brass, and bend up a little roof for this for the long passenger car. So from what I understand, they made in this era, I guess the late, late post-war to 57 to 60 era, they made 2 links to these 3 links to passenger cars. These are what they call bogie passenger cars with the 4-wheel trucks. So there's a short one and a long one, and then there was also a little 4-wheel passenger car. So that makes 3 different types. The other thing that I've learned is that, so we have on the tender here. Hopefully that'll focus. Apologize, I'm still, like I said, not very good at this, but so we have the little British Railways decal. So what I've learned, so obviously being over here in the U.S., I'm real uber familiar with all the U.S. railways and their histories and so forth, but not so much on European stuff, whether it's the British or the German and so forth. And you know, it shouldn't be too surprising that like American railways, with mergers, changes, and history, there's so many little details and nuances of, you know, many different railroads that existed at one time and don't exist anymore. And so when I've learned the British railways is the conglomerate that became from several of the earlier individual or I guess I would say local, but you know, they were mainline large railways, but they were all independent of each other. And after World War II, I don't know if it's because of economic challenges or what, but they all, or many of them, were, you know, put under one umbrella that ended up being British Railways. And I think this happened around 1948. And so from what I've learned, by 1950, the toy manufacturers were following suit with those types of details. So so presuming that at least the tender, even though again it's not correct for this particular locomotive, came after 1950. So anyway, got a lot of learning to do here. This is some really interesting stuff. Video's already getting a little longer than I expected that it would, and obviously I can't show you anything running, although I will say that the little 040 does run. But what I hope to do is, like I said, I've got to locate a couple of wheels for this 440. Now I'll learn some more of the history and kind of get myself a little organized there. And the plan is to do a more formal, you know, service and fix-it type video for this, and then show these trains up running. Because as you see, I do have, with all my mixed match of parts and junk, I do have enough track for two full loops, so I should be able to run both trains together. I'll run the 440 as the passenger train and the little 040 as the freight, I guess, unless I happen into any more you know, Trix Twin or Trix Express, I think is what they also called it later on in the 50s and 60s. Any more of those parts. So if you watch this long, much appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the content. Try and have more things like this. Please, you know, make some suggestions. Like I say, I'm learning how to try to make better videos. So again, still hand holding the camera, so I've got to get something to do that a little better. So anyway, thanks, and if you like it, give a like and maybe consider subscribing. I've got videos for lots of other trains up at this point, and hopefully what I think are some interesting topics. So thanks, and have a good day.